Oh, hello, yeah. Well, it's still going to be stinking hot, isn't it? Phew, yeah. Anyway, one of the things that I am often amused by, should we say, is the right love to own George Orwell. He's one of theirs, after all. He was an Eton schoolboy, for God's sake, yes. Except, of course, well, he was a lefty, wasn't he? He was actually a communist, basically, right up to the end. And you can read 1984 as an anti-communist tract if you want to, but it's just basically anti-authoritarian because it's about his experiences looking at Britain during the Second World War. Yes, and the way that the government would manipulate the public using propaganda, effectively, if you like. And, well, we are very much in that world, aren't we? Yes, it's not a vicious left-wing government, etc. that we have, despite what most of the British press want you to believe at the moment. It's a very authoritarian, neoliberal government that we have, and indeed we have had for basically my lifetime. And they all try and present stories in one of two ways. There is either a kind of just vague hinting things to you because they're withholding information, or there is a more kind of direct manipulation that's going on. And in that latter camp, I thought I'd show you this from the Daily Telegraph, perhaps inevitably about the weekend arrests. Boo, here's Palestine action. Very bad terrorists, etc. Anyway, protesters presented themselves as peaceniks. Yeah, cool it, Daddy-O. You're too square to go to, well, Parliament Square. You can rename it Parliament Circle, if I think. Anyway, but ugliness, ugliness lurked beneath the surface, yes. And we'll have to find that ugliness lurking because I personally couldn't. But anyway, as the police began making arrests at pro-Palestine gathering in London, shouts from the crowd revealed deep hostility towards the police and Israel, which got me thinking about what exactly you would expect to hear at a demonstration against alleged Israeli war crimes where the police were arresting people. Hard to say, really. I think, personally, that the Daily Telegraph should start a new campaign whereby people, of whatever description they are, if they're standing outside hotels and not being keen on migrants, have to, whatever they do, have any concerns about the policing whatsoever, and indeed shout very, very encouraging things to people in the hotels. I think that would make sense, wouldn't it? Maybe not. Anyway, there are things in this article which are skirted over enormously, so let's try this one, okay? Another protester, a wheelchair-using pensioner. Yeah, they're swines, those disabled people, aren't they? If they aren't claiming benefits, they're out demonstrating. Phew, who travelled from Reading, oh my God, to display a sign reading, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action. Yeah, this is what these gits are doing, holding signs. Come back to that organised sign things in a bit. At the demonstration, told the Telegraph he was sure, in inverted commas, the government had been paid by the Israeli embassy to prescribe the group. There is no evidence to support this claim, and indeed the Daily Telegraph is exactly right there. Yes, except of course, well, for this year we've had an awful lot of evidence that there are very, 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 very close ties between the British government in terms of, for example, individual members of the House of Lords and various people in the Home Office, or indeed just generically senior members of the government who are more than happy to consult with the Israeli embassy about things like, I don't know, maybe Palestine action. The Guardian was reporting that but a month ago. So, yes, there are no claims that people have necessarily had money, although certain Labour MPs like Wes Streeting have had money from Israeli groups. Sort of. Concerned patriots who are probably British citizens, one might need to say. But nevertheless, those things are there. So what the Daily Telegraph there has done is try to present you with this idea that this person, this git in a wheelchair from Reading, I mean, nothing screams enemy of the state like a git in a wheelchair telling lies from Reading. But the idea that this bloke is simply wrong. But it's not really, is it, in essence? Anyway, leaving that aside, yeah. The other big claim that the Daily Telegraph was trying to make in terms of, oh, isn't it sinister, is that this was an organised demonstration. So let's look at that, right? Saturday's Palestine Action demonstration had been staged to appear organic. Oh no, as if hundreds had simply converged opposite Parliament at 1 p.m, each with a handmade sign declaring support for the planned group. Yes, this is where it gets deeply sinister. In reality, as the Telegraph has previously revealed, the event was anything but spontaneous. At a meeting in Birmingham last week, groups including Cage International and Defend Our Juries planned the protest, with Mr Begg urging the Muslim community to act in defiance. Yes. These people, these swines, these organised pro-terrorist groups are using social media to organise themselves. It's not the type of thing that other people would do. Yeah. So there you have it, guys. Yeah. These swines are telling porkies, getting cross at people being arrested, getting cross for no reason whatsoever at alleged war crimes, and worst of all, contact each other across the medium of the interwebs, which we all know is there specifically to make children commit suicide or crans or something. You can see how nefarious. Anyway, that was the total amount of nefarious things that were going on with the Daily Telegraph. I would have thought they would have tried a bit harder, but it's very hard to. But the most telling thing about the piece is that normally the Telegraph will allow comments underneath their pieces, but in this case they're not. Because I think an awful lot of people, including an awful lot of Daily Telegraph readers, would look at that and just think to themselves, yeah, that's not actually that threatening or sinister, is it? I mean, there's always the nutters that read the Telegraph that earnestly believe that, the world went to pot somewhere in the region of about 1985 when they actually retired. But there's an awful lot of other people out there that can see what a load of old tosh that is. I'm sorry, but it's along the same lines as GB News reporters standing amongst a crowd of people holding placards and then complaining when one of those placards bumps them on the head, like it's some kind of serious assault. It's not. Anyway, talking of GB News, we have the second of our particular examples of not exactly telling the truth with people, and this is very much by hinting to you that something is very wrong, and also certain elements of omission. So we get this, right, okay, from GB. A-level students with grades as low as 3 E's being accepted to British universities to meet diversity quotas, which we all know, because there's a picture of Robert Jenrick there, is really about brown people. So boo hiss, brown people. Ooh, isn't it bad? Brown people are getting in with much, much fewer results. However, when you actually look at it, okay, it's not what the piece says at all. So here we go. Let's try this, right? Institutions accept these lower grades if the students claim that they're suffering a disadvantage, which can include race or gender. Yes, can do, but it might also include some of those other tricky things, mightn't it? Like being a SEND individual, or perhaps a working class student or someone in Clare. Because of course we do at the same time, and here's where the huge omission comes in, we do have to be very, 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 very concerned about the white working class, right up to the point whereby we might do something about it, in which case we don't, as indeed I said yesterday, and this is a classic one with it. It could include race or gender, yes, isn't that bad? Especially if it was race, that would be awful, wouldn't it? Except, well, no, it's probably a good thing, isn't it, that we allow people from disadvantaged backgrounds to reach their potential? No, not in GB News world. That's wrong, that's anti-white people, unless they're white working class, in which case, I get confused. Anyway, moving on, Bournemouth University admitted students with EEE grades onto its computer science course, which ordinarily demands BCC. However, they were admitted through an additional foundation year, which has much less lower entry requirements. Yes, indeed, because sometimes with certain students you might recommend to them that, just to make sure they don't drop out of a 3-year course, that they try and take a 1-year course. There are an awful lot of students, for financial reasons usually, who drop out of university courses, and it does make sense to do a foundation year, and you can see if it's for you, and you can see if you want to progress forwards. That's actually, if you think about it, which of course GB News don't want you to do, is actually a very, very sensible way of doing it. It's a very, very sensible use of resources rather than having a computer science course which is only going to have like a quarter of the students in the third year that it would normally have. But that's just me knowing things and living in a rational universe, which of course GB News doesn't, because, well, I don't know, it has everybody's best interests at heart, unless of course they're a member of a minority group, in which case it might not, put it that way. Finally, when we get further down in the article, we get this, right? One reason, only one though, for lowering the entry requirements for higher foundation years is that it is financially beneficial for the institution to fill places on less popular courses. Yes, which is of course the real nub of the matter, isn't it? The OSS, that's the Office for Students, said our aim is that anyone with the ability and desire to pursue higher education can access the life-changing benefits it can bring. Hooray! Yes, indeed. Unless of course you can spin it whereby it's a nefarious tale of brown people getting things that they shouldn't have from decent, hard-working, white working class kids anyway, right? But that's reading between the lines very much on this story. That's exactly what it's about. The universities will lower their course requirements to fill their courses. There's no point in having a course if there's no students on it. Now, you might argue that we just, we need to have higher standards like we do in education. We need to have higher standards. Great, okay. But for what end exactly? Yeah, we do have an awful lot of young people at 18 who are very well qualified or reasonably well qualified with A-levels that can't get anything other than a very, very entry-level job. So it makes sense for them to go on to courses like, I would suggest maybe computer science might be an idea, if nothing else, to get better qualified and therefore, do that whole thing that GB News is always very, very keen on, sort of pulling themselves up by their, Nike trainers, basically. But of course, we don't live in that world, because we live in a world whereby we have to spin everything as either the work of nefarious communists, inevitably such as myself, or indeed inevitably the place where brown people are getting uppity. Anyway, British media in a nutshell. Old and new media both doing exactly the same thing at the behest of very, very moneyed interests. And you might ask yourself, why exactly would moneyed interests not want various left-wing ideas of any description to come to the fore? And I personally am way too stupid to understand why that might be. I'll leave you to think about why that might exactly be. Tricky, isn't it? Anyway, do enjoy the Scotchio weather. It's certainly quite warm, isn't it? Yeah, enjoy.